Well, hi, everyone. This is Daniel Williams, Senior Editor at MGMA and host of the MGMA Podcast Network. We are back with another MGMA Insights podcast, and we've got a special guest who has been a co-host on the MGMA podcast before, and that is Senior Advisor Christy Good. Christy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I feel like I shouldn't be welcoming you because you are one of the co-hosts. But you have been so busy working on a book and working on your other projects, so we haven't had Ask an Advisor on lately. So what have you been up to?
Working on the next book,
Okay.
which will be a sequel of this book that we're going to talk about today, or another version of. And just, answering member questions and doing some webinars, presentations. So
Yeah, I know you've been super busy. We have had you working on several books. So just for everybody's edification, MGMA has been developing an advanced strategy for medical practice leaders series. This is the first one. It debuted last year in Nashville at our leaders conference. This is our financial management edition. We don't have a physical copy of the one that Christy and I are going to be talking about. It's going to be ready later in May or early June. And so that is our human resources edition. We're going to talk about that a lot. So first question up for you, and I don't know if I've ever asked you this before, but as a former healthcare practice administrator, how did your experiences shape the content of this book, this Human Resources Strategies book?
Yeah. Well, I just thought about all that I went through in my career in healthcare, and I wanted to bring bits of information that I've learned so I could help other people. And I know I joked with you, but I learned by drinking from a fire hose. I did. I learned and I made mistakes, and I learned from those mistakes, and then I would improve for next time. And I just wanted to use what I've been through in these 20 years of healthcare practice management and share that knowledge. And that kind of helped shape what I wrote in the book.
Yeah. So let's just back up a little bit then and talk about your career. Now, I know you as Senior Advisor, Christy Good, but you also, as you were just mentioning, you were at practices for 20 years. So just give us a little stroll down memory lane, your practice career. What did that look like? Where were you and what'd you do?
Well, I actually started in a laboratory.
Okay.
So I worked there for 10 years, and I started as a research person developing PCR tests. And then from there started, once I got my MBA, became a lab manager and then an interim director. So from there is really where I started getting more involved in the HR process.
Okay.
I was involved in the HR process from the employee side, but once I went into management is where I really had to drink from that fire hose and learn how to everything that I need to know from an HR side, working with HR department as well.
Okay.
And then went into practice management from there after I left the laboratory. And once I was in practice management, as many know from practice management side, you're kind of the guru of everything. So you have to know a little bit of every little piece, like finance, HR, risk and compliance, every little piece, especially if you're in private practice. If you're in private practice, you don't have the benefit of having an HR department like I had the benefit of having.
Right.
But so it's definitely even harder on the private practice side.
Okay. Now, everybody listening, I joke with Christy that she is the Swiss Army knife at MGMA because you do everything. I mean, you're the senior advisor. You answer the Ask an Advisor questions. You jump in, write a couple of chapters of a book. You develop tools that are put on our website. You sometimes help out with MGMA Stat. You jump into podcasts. You do a little bit of everything. You do presentations. In those private practices, is that the role that a lot of practice administrators have to have? They have to wear every single hat, be a Swiss Army knife, so to speak?
Yes, they do. And some people have the benefit of a large organization where they have the resources to help them. But in a private practice, especially an independent group, you're relying on those managers, your supervisors, your administrators to really be a jack of all trades and know how to jump in and take care of budgeting, as well as how to market your group, as well as how to, just do all the HR parts, and also build culture and just everything that takes to be in a practice.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to set the stage for everyone, let you know a little bit about the book. We'll dive into the book itself a little bit, but we'll just lean on Christy here to get a better understanding of that role for HR and some of the circumstances that they're going to have to deal with. And so try to provide y'all with some tools, some tips, just like we do with Ask an Advisor. We just jump into a topic with Christy and just turn on the tape and let her go. So I want to back up a little bit and just talk about this Advanced Strategy for Medical Practice Leaders series. So we do have 3 parts to it. Financial management is already published. HR is going to be out any day now. By the time you're hearing this, it'll probably be out on the street. It'll be available in our bookstore. It'll be available at our upcoming operations conference in Chicago. So you'll be able to access it in a lot of different ways. And then we have our operations edition. That's our final edition, and that's going to be available in our leaders conference, which will be in Denver. We're excited about that. Yeah, we don't have to travel too far for that particular conference. And so what we tried to do was give basic tools and also strategies for our medical practice leaders in this series. So let's talk about that. So what role does strategy play in HR management? Because I have only experienced HR on the side of being an employee and going, hey, when do I get days off? What's my PTO? I go out into our system and see what's available to us. When do I get a raise? When's, performance reviews, all those kind of things. But I didn't think about it in terms of strategy. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think most people don't. And in a large org, you think HR department, and then you have the medical practice. But really, I think people need to see how HR needs to align with what they're doing, such as organizational goals. HR helps set some of those organizational goals. A big one is ensuring regulatory compliance.
Okay.
There's so much compliance that goes into the HR side to make sure that laws are being followed, regulations are being followed, and also just enhancing operational efficiency. I know we need HR for talent acquisition, but how do they help us from the medical practice side do that efficiently? Can they help us think strategically? How can we get to the best pool of candidates so that we're hiring the best and the brightest? And then how do we keep those people? So HR really, you partner with HR in your strategy to really, how do I grow my practice using HR to help align those kinds of things?
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things you and I have talked about in multiple sessions or podcasts that we've had, I get sessions or like webinars, seminars, podcast. We've covered that culture side of it, and we'll dig into that a little bit deeper here in just a minute. So I kind of feel like this is a loaded question because you and I have talked about this so many times, but what are some of the challenges you're seeing when you're talking to human resources leaders in medical practices or those practice administrators that wear multiple hats? What are some of the challenges that they have from a human resources side?
Well, I think from the medical practice side, some of their main challenges, well, we know is staffing. So how do I get those people even in the door? And we know that we are having a staffing conference coming up for MGMA just to try and focus on some of that. And we also know that turnover and burnout. I know people are probably tired of hearing burnout, but it's real.
Yeah.
And how do I incorporate a work-life balance? And so HR, partnering with your HR group, to do that, I don't think people realize that, especially if you're in practice management, you're like, oh, well, I'm looking at what patients we see, what our doctors are doing, what's our volume, what are the finances and our billing. But working with, if you are blessed enough to have an HR department to work with, and you are not the HR department yourself, how do you partner with that group to help you? And then if you are that one in all-encompassing role for your medical practice in a private practice, where are the tools that you can get so that you're not drinking from that fire hose, and that you maybe have some tools that can help you with hiring, with evaluating your staff, with keeping them competent, with building culture, all those kinds of things. And I hope that people will look at this book and see that there are some tools in there and some scenarios to help them, especially if they're not familiar with it.
Yeah, you picked up, commented on a lot of things just then, so I'm going to try to comment on a few of them here. One of those is this idea of burnout. So just for our listeners here, Christy and I are in a group right now with several MGMA members, and it's a series that we've developed here, and it's on managing stress. And we've got a really good group, and it's still open. So if anybody is interested in that, you can email either myself, Daniel at dwilliams@mgma.com, or Christy at cgood@mgma.com, and let us know you want to join that group. This is the interesting thing. We met yesterday. Christy and I were there in the group. I had some technical difficulties, so Christy took things over there. But what we did when we started the session, so to speak, we asked everybody to just go around and kind of comment on what's going on in your world. What was the overriding theme that you heard from everybody?
Stress.
It was stress. It was a lack of bandwidth. It was stress. It was, nobody said the word burnout, but there was a lot of stress, a lot of juggling, a lot of things all at the same time, and you could just, it was palpable. You could feel like this is the right program for medical practice leaders, because there's so much stress going on. There's so many demands on their time. And so, frankly, I felt bad for them. I mean, I felt bad for what's going on, and I feel good about the work that we're doing and trying to provide some actionable tools, some tips, some strategies, anything we can do to make y'all's lives easier. And so I'm just going to put in a shameless plug for what Christy does. Ask an advisor. Talk about that button that's on the website one more time. We haven't done that in a while.
Yeah, we haven't done that for a while. But on our website, it says Ask MGMA. And on there, you can do a drop down and pick. And if you wanted to come to someone like a subject matter expert, you would drop down and pick practice management advice, something like that. But it's right there. But we also have our government affairs team on there that you can ask questions to, our customer service team if you're struggling with anything. So it's a great resource that people definitely should take advantage of. And then, yes, come to us and ask questions, because like just recently this week, I was helping someone with a TRICARE question. And it takes some digging, but I'm glad they reached out and I did the research for them to help them.
Yeah.
And we know that, and what you brought up were the people that are under all that stress are the people wearing all those hats.
That's it.
Trying to do the HR, trying to do the budgeting, the finance, all those different roles. And so reaching out to someone, at MGMA is a great opportunity for them so that they can just get the help, that little bit of help that they might need. Right.
And you were telling me, Christy and I rode over here from the MGMA headquarters over to our Brand Viva studio here. And you were telling me there that there had been some changes. So I know we've talked about this on Ask an Advisor before, but what did it used to look like? And then what does it look like now again?
So it used to just be a bar that said Ask Advisor.
Right.
And now it just says Ask MGMA, a little green button. And from there, you can do a drop down.
Right.
There's even options to, if you want to participate in content development with us, if you want to exhibit at one of our conferences, there's a lot of options to pull down. You just pick and then you submit. And so we're here to help.
Yeah.
And And that's what you need to take advantage of. Just like I talk about is reach out to your HR department, reach out to us, for help, for advice. You don't need to do it alone.
Right. And I just wanted to clarify that. I know that if y'all listen to all the podcasts, you've heard Christy and me talk about that a lot of times before, but I just want to make sure that y'all understand that it did change. It used to say, I think, ask an advisor. Yeah. Now it says ask MGMA. So if you go there, then you can get those questions answered in real time. So I want to dig into the book a little bit. So we cover a lot of things in this book. In this podcast, we're not going to go over everything. However, wanted you to understand that within this book, you're going to get some tips and tools. First on just how to build out a strategy. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to get into organizational culture. We're going to get into job analysis. We're going to get into comp and benefits. We're going to get into a couple of the chapters that Christy worked on. One of those is labor law compliance. I didn't know you went to law school as well.
I think I might go after this.
You spent a lot of time on labor law compliance. So talk about that, because it's really a different thing to be, a driving force in developing labor law compliance rules, regulations, policies for the organization, as opposed to onboarding or building a culture or having a wellness program. I mean, these are just, even within the confines of being an HR person, that's a lot of different hats to have to wear just within
Absolutely, within HR.
I know.
Absolutely. And developing benefits package is a whole nother animal that I am not as good at. But my background, because I was in laboratory for 10 years, you had to be so tight in your compliance.
Right.
You had to make sure everything was dotted and crossed and everything. And so I feel very strongly about risk and compliance and labor laws. And that's why I tackled that one, because we don't know everything, and if you don't know everything, you need to find someone or a place to find that information, because if you're not doing something correctly on the labor laws in the risk and compliance section of HR, you're putting your whole company at risk. You're putting your private practice at risk, and laws change, and there's also laws that change by state, and so you really need to know your federal laws and then your state laws. And I think that was the biggest thing that I was really trying to drive home was, if you don't know it, look it up. And if you don't know, ask someone who does. Because if you mess up somewhere in that side, you can get fines that your company is not going to be happy getting.
Right. Yeah, and I wanted to comment on that because we've been, a book is different than a podcast. Christy and I are talking right now. This podcast will be out within the next 2 weeks. There's some podcast, if y'all pay attention to some of them, where I'll be on the ground at one of our face-to-face events, and I'll edit it and publish it that night, So that's a podcast. A book is not that.
No.
Christy and I and other people at MGMA have been working on this human resources book now for, oh my gosh, in the development stage, it was like 2 years ago. And then we came on board about a year ago. And then here's something I found, y'all. There are a lot of people in healthcare that are fine talking about culture. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that are equipped to talk about staffing and job analysis and some of those other topics. We got to the labor law and compliance chapter and we couldn't find people. So if you're listening, let us know. We would love to have them. And we can't thank Christy enough because she came in and pinch hit. I was just talking to Ryan Reeves, who's our lead editor for the book. And I was saying, wow, I think about Christy as like a pinch hitter in baseball. They brought in their reliever, that lefty, and we got Christy to come in and pinch hit and hit a home run for us, in the bottom of the ninth inning. So talk about that process. I mean, what was it like when you said, okay, sure, I'll raise my hand again. You voluntold me or you volunteered. I'm not sure which it was, but you agreed. And thank you for writing this compliance and labor law chapter. So why are there not experts in that field?
And there probably are. They're lawyers.
So we didn't have the funds to get a
No.
billable hours that a lawyer
No.
would have charged just to write that chapter.
But if I were ever to go into law, I think compliance law is very interesting.
Yeah.
I think patent law is very interesting.
Okay.
Again, that's very, you have to cross your T's, dot your I's.
Right.
I just did, good thing is I like to research.
Okay.
And so I kept digging and digging and digging and finding and making sure we were covering everything and going out there. And then sometimes we just put a note in there like, you really need to check your state because we can't cover all state laws. And then we also know that things change too. And so it's always good to make sure you're looking up your most current HR compliance, your labor laws for your state, because they do vary sometimes, just alone in minimum wage.
Right.
Minimum wage laws vary by state.
Yeah.
Like no tomorrow.
For sure.
So you definitely need to know that. If you're going to go live somewhere, know what your minimum wage laws are. But from the medical practice side, you're just focused on trying to get people in the door to take care of patients. And so often you're not thinking about all those legal pieces that may be putting you at risk. And I think that's why I was like, okay, we need a labor section. We need a law risk and compliance section, and we need to cover some of the basics for everyone. And that's why I was like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, we cannot thank you enough. And you not only wrote the compliance law chapter, you also wrote a chapter on KPIs. So talk about some of the KPIs that an HR leader needs to be responsible for, to be measuring and, paying attention to.
Sure. And I'm a data nerd, so I liked KPIs. I was like, yay. Well, I think the most common one that people mostly think of is employee turnover rate. And I know an employee engagement and satisfaction. So what is your employee satisfaction scores? And what is your employee turnover rate? And I was lucky enough that my first job was in a healthcare organization that kept their employee turnover rate at 7%, which is amazing these days. And they did it by really engaging their employees, doing surveys, and then we had focus groups. And that was a large organization. But they invested in the employees, and that was driven from the HR side, but working with the different practices, because they had to work with those practices to get employees to participate in those focus groups and to take an active role in why do they want to stay in that organization. So right there is a good example of how a strategic partnering with HR and the medical practices really work, because you're trying to keep those high-performing employees to stay there. And so what do you need to do to keep them there? And so those are some of the main KPIs that HR does. But some of the other ones that are important are like time to fill positions. So how long does it take me to fill one of those important positions? We know it's harder for physicians than maybe a MA, but we still need to be tracking that. Compliance on a regulatory training, we should be doing mandatory training every year. How are they monitoring that and making sure that happens? Absentee rate is really...
That's the one I was going to bring up.
I was like, absentee rate, most people do not think of that at all.
Yeah.
But it's important.
Huge.
Because we know that with burnout, with just a lot of things going on these days, you should be seeing what is making my employees not come to work.
Right.
What is affecting them? Why are people, calling out, or why are they not showing up? And so I don't think people think of that as an important KPI, but it is.
It's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And then of course, retention of the high performers. So HR and as a medical practice, you should be doing employee reviews, but also of your employees that are your high performers, are they staying? Are they leaving? And then, of course, we know like your staff to patient ratios. That's important just for patient satisfaction as well as staff satisfaction. And then the other one is more incident reports with like OSHA and HIPAA and any of those workplace safety, or even if it's if you have a program that you can report things anonymously that might be affecting your work. That was at one of the big organizations I had. And then that's important to follow up with those. So just that workplace safety, making people, and that goes along with building culture and building, a place where people want to come.
Such a data nerd. Good gracious. I'm teasing. So I have a final question then. So let's get out the crystal ball and look at the ways that the role of human resources is evolving in the healthcare industry. I mean, you and I have a lot of conversations about AI, the technology that's coming into place. There's a lot of other things going on too, because I've had conversations with some of our business partners, and they're developing to address the staffing shortages. They're looking globally. They're having entire workforces that can do a lot of the administrative work, that can be call centers, that can do all kinds of things. So just in general, talk about some of the evolutionary pieces that you're seeing that affect HR.
Well, I mean, you brought up call centers. We get a lot of questions on how do I build an effective call center.
Right.
So that is something that I've seen medical practices doing, at least in big groups, right? But I think, and we did not address this in our book yet because we had already sent it to production, was just the use of AI and how AI is going to be used. And we know that AI is already being used for like recruitment tools. We know that we've been putting resumes in online, but they're also using AI then to kind of look at those resumes. They're using predictive analytics for workforce planning. So I think that how we're using these tools, be it AI or some other form of technology, is going to be important. You don't want to take the person out of HR, right? You don't want to take the human resource part out of HR.
Right.
It needs to still be human. You can't just all be bots and go by AI.
Right.
So you need to figure out how do you handle and use it wisely. We also at MGMA have recently talked about how do we use AI.
Right.
And so I think that you definitely need HR to guide medical practices in the use of AI and where it is appropriate and where it may not be. You have to watch out for HIPAA for that as well, as we know. That's a big HR. HR should be watching HIPAA when it comes to AI. Yeah. That is going to put them at risk if they don't. But there's a lot of other things. I think that HR and medical practices are going to have to still figure out how to deal with flexible work arrangements, remote work, that includes telehealth services, flexible scheduling. We know patients and employees both want that. They want that flexibility. Some like being able to do telehealth and just call in and to see their provider. Some providers like that because they can stay longer without extending office hours for their MAs. So there's a lot of different variations you can do there. But I think an interesting one, too, was we know we've also been talking about integrating social determinants of health.
Right. And
how are we going to help our workforce do that? And AR, or HR, I said AR, sorry. I'm thinking AI and HR together. HR, along with medical practices, need to figure out maybe how to partner with some of those community organizations to support that. So I think people think HR, hire, fire, but it is so much more.
Right.
And medical practices need to lean on their HR departments for some of that. And if they don't have an HR department, they need to lean on books like ours to say, what do I need to know? What do I need to be aware of? What do I need to consider before just jumping in? Because I know when I was in it, I didn't realize all that HR did. HR probably doesn't, a department HR doesn't always know everything a medical practice does. And so how do you partner and make that work in a going forward direction for strategic planning?
Yeah, I love that. Before we go, we were talking previously about burnout, stress management, work-life balance. I have to throw this in because you and I work so closely together on podcasts. We work on other things. You don't have your co-host, Mr. Snuffles, in this particular podcast. Tell us about Mr. Snuffles, but more importantly, the work you do, because this is amazing. You do something pretty incredible with a lot of furry friends out there.
Oh,
yeah.
you mean my fostering?
Yeah. So just share that, because that's something when people are looking at like finding a work-life balance, finding some purpose outside of work, I think that's the coolest thing. And so just share that before we sign off here, because I think...
I think you need work-life balance. I mean, you have a daughter that goes to college, and you go support her.
I sure do.
and that gives you a good away from work enjoyment.
Yeah.
And you have animals too.
I sure
so
do.
our animals are very important to help relieve that stress.
Yeah.
And Mr. Snuffles likes to be a lap cat, and he is a rescue cat who has lots of issues, who will probably live with me now forever till he passes away.
Yeah.
But he does like to join my lap when Daniel and I are talking, and he makes lots of noises.
He does. Y'all have probably heard him on some of the podcasts. It sounds like our stomachs are unsettled, but that's Mr. Snuffles. Or at least that's him. I'm going to blame him. I'm getting all verklempt here. Yeah.
But I think it's important. That's a good point. Is that to find that balance, because I think all of us could just put everything out into our work and then get burnt out. And then taking that step aside and trying to have fun, and we have a book club, and that book club brings some fun.
It does,
and that's an awesome thing. And so I think if you can do something fun in your work, and with your group, and just even outside of work, I think those are all important. Yeah,
you make a great point. If there's anything y'all can do, if you're listening here and going, well, how do I get the team, involved? Maybe do a survey or raise a hands, find something, an activity that y'all can all enjoy. Maybe it's a day of volunteering somewhere. We've done some things like that at MGMA through Project Cure.
Project Cure.
Yeah, Project Cure. So maybe y'all can find something like that, or maybe there's
puppy yoga.
Puppy yoga.
That benefits a lot of shelters out there.
That's right.
So you can always find a puppy yoga nearest you.
That's it. Do that. Go to Top Golf, whatever it might be to blow off some steam, just to, kind of build that culture. Because that can be kind of difficult in these days when work is remote or hybrid, and you're trying to find, well, how do you strike that balance where you can make everybody feel included in the programs that you do? So, those are just some things that we suggest here, and some items that you may find in the...
Hey, and you guys have Volley Llama group?
That's it, our volleyball team.
And you have a whole mix of ages in that. I think that's important to realize too. And I think we bring that up in the book too, but just being aware of the different age groups you have, the different generations, and then what each generation needs and how they like to communicate and how they like to work together. And I think bringing everyone together is very important. That is so true. All right. Well, at this point, we are going to sign off. But again, by the time you're listening to this, our next book in the Advanced Strategy for Medical Practice Leaders series will be available. It's the Human Resources Edition. So I'm Daniel Williams. This is Christy Good. Thank y'all for being listeners to the MGMA Podcast Network.